Welcome to Business Legal Lifecycle TV, the live TV show all about the legal aspects of your business to help educate you on complex legal terms in an easy to understand manner, to help understand why you need to do certain things in your business from a legal point of view, and to help you develop a plan for the future. Our mission at Business Legal Lifecycle is to help empower all small to medium-sized businesses around the world to get access to legal advice so that they can help build their communities and make the world a better place. My name's Jeremy Stretton, one of the founders of the Business Legal Lifecycle. Today is our Wednesday show where we're going to be doing an interview, and today we've got the pleasure of welcoming Jenny Letts from Jenny Letts Valuation and Forensics to the show. So Jenny is the founder of Jenny Letts Valuation and Forensics, which was founded in 2013. Jenny has spent over 19 years specializing in helping business owners who are going through a separation or conflict know and understand the value of their business and give them a successful outcome. Jenny works with personal, corporate and government clients across a broad range of matters, including business and company appraisal and valuation of intangibles, tracing of assets for commercial and family law purposes, and economic loss assessments. With extensive experience in forensic and valuation methodologies, Jenny has the ability to draw on the most effective methodologies to deliver successful outcomes for lawyers and their clients, providing assessment reports in a timely manner. Jenny's also an expert witness in court-related matters, and Jenny has a deep understanding of her responsibilities under the various courts and tribunal jurisdictions, and she's often engaged by other parties. And Jenny maintains a high standard of professionalism by providing impartial, unbiased and independent assessments. I've known Jenny for quite some time through a mastermind group that we're part of, and this was a really fun interview. So in this interview, I go through a lot of ground about valuing businesses and going through some really great tips about how you can value your business. As always, we have our show notes and our workbook. So please go to businesslegallifecycle.com.au/185 for show 185, and you'll be able to download the workbook there. Without any further ado, here's my interview with Jenny Letts.
Welcome, Jenny, to Business Legal Lifecycle podcast.
Oh, thank you, Jeremy. Happy to be here.
Great. Well, so I'm going to break this interview up into a few different parts. I want to start off with a bit about you and your business, get on to valuing businesses, and then a bit about the future. So if you're ready to go, can you tell us a bit about yourself and how did you get into the valuation world?
Sure. So I started off quite early. I guess going back to school, I was never good at memorizing timetables and everything like that. However, I loved the complex reasoning, so that algebra just got me. And that was the only thing that helped me get through passing because I couldn't study from a textbook. Then I started working for a video store and quickly saw that when DVDs came in, that was not going so well. So I went to go and first semester at uni, met a girl, and I was doing a couple of majors, and one of them was accounting. Met a girl in class, and she worked for an accounting firm, said there was a position going for summarising financial statements in the litigation department. And so I started there, and it has delivered all the things that I look for in a job. I like the days to be different. I like the problems to be there, so it challenges me on my thinking a little bit. And I get that. So I get projects that I get to work on every so often, then they're out the door, hopefully. Sometimes they come back around when they have to go to court, but and appeal and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, most of the time I quite enjoy it. I love the problem solving, and I love being able to help people because usually they have a problem, they don't know what the figure is. And being able to really, it takes a lot of time to think through, well, okay, this problem, how am I going to show this in the simplest way, usually to people that are a little bit scared of numbers or don't necessarily deal with them every day. So explain that in a simple form that's going to work well to get my point across, and as simply as possible. And I really quite enjoy that challenge.
Yep. I love that. And I love the distinction that you didn't particularly like maths at school. I didn't particularly like maths at school and still don't. So.
Yeah. Well, I liked it as far as solving problems. I could see that. And as I'm going through finalising CA, oddly enough, I actually really enjoyed tax as the technical subject. That's probably been my favourite, but more so I could apply it to my own business.
Yeah.
Work out what I could do and what I couldn't do.
Very good.
Which surprised me because I wasn't interested at all.
I remember doing tax law, and it was an interesting subject. Yeah, I did quite well in it. So
Yeah, I didn't mind that either, but mainly because my lecturer was hot. Yeah.
Well, that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah, that is.
So
Yeah.
you moved into your own business back in 2013. Why did you start your own business?
Well, I'd worked for a mentor for 14 years,
Okay.
and we started to have some differences of opinion and differences as to how we were going to run our business moving forward.
Yep.
So we split, and I looked around for other places, other homes, but I sort of had ideas of how I wanted to do things a little bit differently.
Okay.
And if you ever look at our marketing, it's not so prevalent on the website, but if you're a referrer that we deal with, you'll know that we're very well known for our coffee, and we use that very heavily in our marketing. We have little products named after coffee and things like that. So we have a bit of fun with it. And for what I do in forensics, because business valuing comes under forensics, it's usually in very big firms, and I wouldn't have had the freedom to be able to offer products to people, which I think help solve their problems, particularly some of the smaller ones. Yeah, so it worked out well.
Yep, excellent.
Yeah.
So you've got a lot of experience in the industry. So how do you think that's helped you with what you're doing now?
So it's one of those areas where you just can't buy experience. You learn so much from each business that you go and see. So I value businesses from truck drivers to aviaries to plastic surgeons. So it's a huge range, and you can imagine I don't get an awful lot of them at a time. So over time that builds, you learn what little idiosyncrasies go with which industries, where they get work from. You may have people in the same industry that receive their work from different sources, and to understand all of that.
Yep.
The other thing is we get such a limited time to dive into a business and really work out what makes it tick. And we've got to do that so we make sure we get the valuation right. You have to be very good at reading documents and very good at reading people as well too, and asking the right questions. And that just takes time to learn how to do that, particularly in litigation, because everything has to be written. So learning how to very quickly figure out what documents I'm going to need, what elements I can pull from those documents to solve that problem that I'm trying to solve.
Yeah, that's excellent, and that's so necessary in the litigation space. You know, you need to be able to do that properly, and you know, there's a lot of, and we're talking about before the call about other professions that try and do valuations, and that they just don't have the experience to be able to do that properly for what's needed.
Oh, there's so many little idiosyncrasies that go into businesses, like whether you own 70%, 100%, or whether you own 25%. There are little things that we do that people don't come across normally. Whether it's a franchise, whether they have one contract with, whether they may be a banana grower who just sells to Coles, or they may be a banana grower that sells to the wholesalers at the market. How does that affect things?
Yep.
And it just comes down to seeing as much as you possibly can.
Yep.
And dealing with that. But then the offset of that is there's not too many people that just do what I do. There's only a handful of us that do that.
And that's why it's so valuable to have it, because not that many people actually do it. So it's good to have people that can actually help to do the valuation.
Yeah, and it doesn't. It's always good to have an independent person to do that as well too, because then it's not hindering on anyone. We're not going to steal your clients because we don't do that work.
That's right.
So yeah, it's the experience. It just is invaluable. When I started in my career, I would work very, very long hours, but you're playing with people's lives. So you have to know what you're doing and be very confident that you are correct. And when I do evaluation, I spend a few days afterwards ripping it apart to try and figure out, well, have I considered every element?
Yep.
Is it all covered? Because quite often, particularly I do a lot of matrimonials. I also do work in the land court. I'm playing with other people's money here. I've got to get that right.
Well,
very important.
There's probably a whole podcast we could do on family law and all the rest of it. That's not the purpose of our podcast, so we can talk about it later. But let's talk about valuing businesses, and that does come into the family law context, obviously. You've got those kind of disputes. So, as you know, the theme of this month is phase 11 of the business legal lifecycle, which is about sale of the whole or part of the business. So, when do you think a business owner should think about the value of their business?
Well, it's kind of an important thing all the way through, really, isn't it? If you're smart enough and you have the foresight to start looking at that right at the beginning, well, you can start putting things in place that are going to set that up. The technology that you use, the processes that you start to document, everything can go to increasing that value right from day one, even just putting budgets in place, that sort of thing. It's something people think about, or should think about all the way through, but I don't find that always happens. I find a lot of people come to me when they're looking to issue share rights, issuing more shares to bringing in a partner, or they're looking to exit this business. And quite often they come right at the end, where even 3 to 5 years beforehand to start thinking about those things is a good idea. Because if you go, okay, well, what's my business worth today? What do I want it to be worth? How do we get there?
Yeah, and that's something that's often missed. And it was a bit of a deliberately loaded question, because I'm very big on making sure people have everything in place. And this is one area that a lot of business owners, they don't think about early enough, and they don't know that they need to do it. And you don't know what you don't know. So I guess from coming on the back of that, what are some of the key considerations that people should be thinking about, business owners should be thinking about in determining the value of their business going forward?
So essentially, with any valuation, there's 2 elements to it. First of all, we look at income streams. So where you, what's your net profit at the end of the day? What are you taking home out of that business? And then the other side of that is the risk that gets associated with that business. What's the likelihood that that's going to continue? When we're looking at risk, there's lots of factors that we go through. I use what's known as a build-up method. So I start with the government bond rate and I add risk onto that. So we go through and look at the economy, and we look at size risk. I look at then I start to look at the industry risk, and then I start to look at business-specific risk. And we go through and work that out. The so many things that we can talk about in terms of risk.
Could you give us an example? Maybe pick an industry and give us an example of one. The risk.
Yeah, sure. Well, do you want to pick an industry, and I'll talk to that if you like.
Let's go real estate agents.
Real estate agents. Okay. So real estate agents are an interesting one, because there's usually 2 parts to it. There's usually the sales part, and then there's the rent roll. Now, rent rolls are historically, there's a marketplace for those, so we tend to value those based around that, and it's a bit of a benchmark way of valuing. So you're looking for similar numbers, rates that people pay, commission rates, and that'll give you your multiple for the rent roll. But when we're looking at the sales part, you are looking at, well, okay, where are we getting that income from? Do I have, where does the customers come from? Are they coming because we've got a great marketing plan? Do we own that marketing plan, or do we pay a franchise fee for that? In which case, how strong is that franchise? Is it going to continue? What area are we in? Do we market specifically to a particular type of person? Like, have we got an ideal client that we may be selling to, or do we just scatter it and go across? Are we well known for doing auctions? Are we well known for doing tender bids? Are we getting that because we've got 2 key staff that are just sales gurus and they just go out and they sell, and if we lost those, we'd be up the creek.
Yep.
Have we got them tied into contracts? All these are elements of risk that are specific to that business and specific to that industry. The other thing we start looking at is the economy. How are we doing? How is banking going? At the moment, we've got the Royal Commission coming down. Everyone's a little bit uncertain as to whether people are going to get loans. Well, that's going to affect the real estate industry.
Mm-hmm.
But for how long? Is it going to affect the real estate industry? Is it going to be for the next 6 months? Is it going to be for the next 5 years?
Yep.
Or perhaps it may not affect this particular real estate agency at all because it may be in a high area.
Yep.
They may sell a lot of units. And it may be investors, say in Brisbane at the moment, there's a lot of units, high-rise going up. People coming from other states where it's a bit more expensive for them to buy, but they can definitely buy up here. It's all those sorts of elements.
Yep.
Does that give you a bit of a rundown?
Yeah, it does. No, that was really good. I think the complexity, I think, is what I wanted to get across. There's, just in a real estate industry, people don't think about all of the different things that need to go into it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it even comes down to the term of the contract. So I go through and read the franchise contracts. I'll go through and read the lease that they have as well too, because a real estate agency, whilst there's an element of advertising, it's a bit of a spot. It's a location business. People will come to that, walk past it, go, okay, what's in the window today?
Yep.
Or the other thing is, we've gone to this realestate.com where we're looking online for things as well too.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you can be pulling into that. But how prevalent is that? How much marketing budget do they spend on their clients and things like that?
Yeah, and that's the point. That there's so many different things to consider on the valuation side. That's why people need, when they're valuing a business, they need to get someone who knows what they're talking about, because there's just so many different things to factor in there. Yeah.
And it's not just, so you can get somebody who's another real estate agent and go, oh, well, I'd pay this much for it. Sure. But it depends. Well, that's what that person would be able to pay for it. The type of valuations that I do are more, they're called fair market value generally. And it's at arm's length. If everything were commercial, this is what an investor would pay.
Yes.
You can tweak that up, you can tweak it down, depending on what you want.
Yep.
So we've done negotiations before where businesses have wanted to buy a business, so it's worth more to them than it is to somebody else. And they're prepared to pay a premium for that.
Yeah.
And you see that on the stock market quite often.
In what sense?
Well, like Google buying various entities and there's ridiculous valuation put on it. It wasn't worth that, but it's worth it to Google to buy it for that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, like Instagram, they famously paid it. Was $1 billion for Instagram, or was that WhatsApp? Something like that.
Yeah, and if we were to value that, it's not what we would value it at. It might be. I haven't done a valuation on those, but it might be an interesting exercise. But we do work on those premiums, and we're jumping into really technical valuation stuff at the moment. But there are premiums put on businesses for that particular reason. There are also discounts put on purchases as well too for various reasons.
Yep.
In the US, there is a the name escapes me at the moment, but there are publications put out every year which show you what they are and what they are on the stock market.
Yep.
Because obviously their stock market is larger than most places in the world. But people measure that detail.
Yep.
And so they can say, well, this transaction on this many shares was premium of X.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we can then apply those down.
Yeah. I think as I say, that's all really good information for people to understand exactly what goes into that process. And it's not just as simple as, going, well, what would someone else pay for it? That is one way of doing it, but it's not necessarily going to get you the fair market value. So
no, and that's more of a rule of thumb way of doing it, which a lot of older school people like to look at, and it's always the way. It's an easy way to value. It's an easy way. You just go, it's 3 times earnings. But what if you've worked really hard and you've got all these systems in place and it just runs nicely? Is that fair to value that at some place that doesn't have all of those?
Yeah, that's right.
It's not the way I would.
Yeah.
We have tested individually.
Yeah, absolutely. So Yeah, a lot of our viewers and listeners, I think, would fall into the category of people who probably haven't thought about valuing their businesses and increasing that value. And I always, when I'm advising people, I always say, well, have a think about what would happen if something happened to you. God forbid you got hit by a bus or something like that. And so I'm always very big on putting steps in place to start getting your business ready for sale, and something that I've done in my own business and something I think everyone should do. What are some practical steps that our listeners and viewers can start doing today to start improving the value of their business?
Yeah, well, just start to document your systems and processes. Anything that you do on a repetitive basis,
yep,
you can document that. Years and years ago, we started off and we were helping a company do the ISO 9000. Now it's changed up a bit, but essentially there's a folder there for each person's role so that people can step in and out of it. I valued a business late last year that had a very high multiple on it, and the reason they had a very high multiple is they had a few managers that ran that business,
yep,
and every so often those managers would swap roles.
okay.
So they could fill in for anyone. So it lessened the risk that business was highly reliant upon one or two people.
Yep.
So if they would leave, other people would step in. And it was quite a simple business, but they had systems and processes for everything. And because of that, I did quite a high multiple on it. Well, and other factors as well.
Can you just speak to a little bit why that does reduce the risk? So having the systems and procedures in place, just so people can understand exactly why.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you have one person that does a job absolutely wonderful, and they know how they do it, what happens if they're sick? If something happens to somebody in their family, they step away, you will see a big void because people will try and step in, not know how that happens, how that goes. How are you going to, what if you want to sell that business and that person doesn't want to go with them?
Yeah.
You've lessened the value. Any wise buyer of any business is going to go in and go, well, who are the key staff? Who do I need to keep?
Yep.
If they don't have to keep staff, and they can bring in other people, well, they're going to go, well, that's pretty valuable. The other thing is it allows you to scale.
Yeah.
So you may be able to bring in some technology into place, or the ability to just bring in other staff and it not be particularly reliant upon them. If we take it a step further and we go into some of the professions, you can build that IP into something that you can sell, a tangible object that you can sell. So I value intellectual property. We value branding. We value systems and processes inside of businesses as well too. I had a real estate agency that had brilliant systems and processes, and somebody wanted to come and buy those and duplicate them. And they said, well, what are they worth? So we go in and we value that element of the business.
Okay. Anything else? So systems and processes, that's a big one. Is anything else that our listeners and viewers could do straight away to start increasing the value?
Know your customers. Know where you get your customers from.
Okay.
Start tracking those leads. Know your conversion rate. Try and look to see if there's anywhere risky where you might be at risk. That if one industry went bad, if you get 90% of your customers from, say, the medical industry and they stop, what would happen if they stopped using you?
Yeah.
Would the business die? Can you have multiple streams? Or are you a niche and you just want to be that? Well, then how do you go about making sure that technology is not going to come in and take over?
Yeah.
Or there's not going to be some simple way? You've always got to be looking ahead, knowing where your customers come from, why they come to you, what makes them come to you, and why they're happy. And look to see, well, play devil's advocate, what if?
Yep. And
try and reduce those risks.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of businesses out there, a lot of small businesses that are reliant on one client or a government department, or they probably don't even realise that they're actually almost working for that one customer. They're almost an employee.
Yeah, and the contracts with those sorts of customers have changed now. I know myself, I work for government agencies, and years ago we were the person that you went to. Now you're on a panel.
Yep.
And you're a preferred supplier on that panel. So you're not guaranteed work. So whilst you may have this preferred supplier agreement, it's no longer a guarantee of work and no longer a strict contract.
Yep.
So, but it's still worth something because you did all the work to get the tender, to put it up there, to be on that panel.
Yeah.
And those sorts of things, you've got to look at to those contracts as well too, to make sure that you can sell them if you were to sell the business as well.
Yeah.
So putting those sorts of things in place. When you were talking before about forward planning and why people may need evaluation, it could be on insurance purposes as well too.
Yep.
If you don't know what you're worth, it can be for going for loans as well too. I understand probably not everyone's doing that at the moment with the Royal Commission and everything like that, but it's still something you need to think about. The other thing I'd suggest that people do is, whilst, and as business owners, we all run things through the books to make it slightly more tax deductible. It's really good to know what benefits you're receiving out of that business, if there are those, and a way to be able to make that clear to any buyer. And to try and keep things at a commercial arm's length transaction. I find a lot of business owners don't pay themselves a wage. So, and some people like it that way. My thoughts on that are, if you're doing work in the business, you should be paid a commercial rate for that work. And then you should have a shareholder hat as well too, where you're receiving profits from that business.
I think that's really important, and I think something we don't do enough of as business owners is putting those different hats on at different parts of our business.
No.
We've started doing that as a law firm and actually having those discussions with hats on. Well, we don't physically put hats on, but we say we're putting our different hats on for different roles. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think, and you have to, it takes a little bit of learning to get your head around that, but if you can be an employee and you get paid for the work that you do or that in that role, then somebody else can step into that. It's not going to hurt the business if you were to step back and somebody else step in, depending on the role, obviously. If it's a rainmaker role, then it's going to be something different. But, yeah, I'm a big believer. When we go through and value, that's one thing we always do. So I'm always on it. People tell me what you do, how many hours do you do, all the duties that you do, and then I have to go and work out a commercial salary for them. If we can get somebody else to do that, brilliant. It's on litigation, but we can't always. So we have to take a pretty good estimate as to what we, based on the information we have, what we think a commercial level remuneration would be.
Sure. And that kind of leads into my next question. And I see this a lot with the small business owners that we've acted for over the years, but they like to take cash and not declare their income. So can you now, and this is something that I talk about a bit, but I'd like to get your view as a valuer. What effect does that have on the value of a business?
So over the years, I've done a lot of work in the land court, and most of the time I work for the government. Our job is, when land gets resumed, to go in, value the business and work out what those people what's the fair value for that business. And you find there's quite a few where it's a cash business, so, small amounts, and at the end of the day, the books, it's not worth anything. And yet they're going, well, but it is, but then you're going to run into trouble. I mean, that's a particular case where courts and tax and everything comes into play. But if you're taking cash out, it's not going to show up on your books, so you can't add that in at the end. It just doesn't work both ways. You're doing yourself an injustice there, but also if you're wanting to show a history of earnings for yourself, if you're taking cash, then you need to almost sort of spend that on cash, because to buy a house or anything, it's going to catch up with you at some point from the tax office. It's in that movie Meet Joe Black. There's nothing in this world as certain like death and taxes, and it'll always come and catch you. I
always say that there's this, as technology gets better, the tax office is looking at things like Facebook. They're looking at at all of your social media, and this is a little bit off the valuation space, but it's relevant. Is that they if they see that you're taking these overseas holidays and spending all this money, then they're going to come and ask you why you're getting that money. And
absolutely, we do those sorts of investigations to work out, well, hang on a second, you're saying you only earn $10,000 a year, but your living costs, you're spending $100,000 a year. Where's that money coming from? Yeah, we do those investigations as well. The other thing I was going to say, no, it skipped out of my head. I can say.
Well, I'll make a point on that just while you're thinking about that. And that it actually came up. I've never practiced in the criminal law space, but it really came to the fore in that space with drug money and money from illegal activities, that they were able to trace people's lifestyles based on the money they were getting from there, and that's just moving into the commercial world as well. Like I know of businesses like coffee shops that you could just throw a gold coin in the jar and they would give you a coffee, and they were living these extravagant lifestyles that were being investigated, and then the taxman would come and knock on their door and say, well, how are you doing this? And people don't realise that they are, especially if you're active on social media, it's all public. You might even have your property settings on, but they can realise it all. So
it is. The other problem that people have in those cash businesses is sometimes they're paying staff cash, which can just cause a horrendous issue. I've had clients that have come to me wanting to have a problem, sue for an economic loss claim because there's various issues that have arisen, but they're paying a lot of expenses in cash. How can I help? That the insurance companies are going to pay out based on that, because it's just going to be too much of a nightmare. The other thing I was going to say to you is, whilst some businesses can take cash, a lot of other people take money out of the business and just stick it to a loan account.
Yep.
So we end up with this big loan account sitting where the director owes money to the company or to a family trust.
Yep.
And it turns out that both of those are going to cause you what's known in the accounting world as a Division 7A issue, where the tax office don't like you taking money and not paying tax on it at some point.
That's right.
And it's going to come back and bite you. And I see that a lot now. I know we're talking about selling businesses, but this is a problem. If you've got to work out what you're selling as well too. Are you selling the entire entity?
Yep.
Or are you selling the business inside the entity? Because if you're selling the business inside, then you're still going to end up with that Division 7A issue that you're going to have to pay tax on at some point.
And your buyer may not want to buy the company if there's a loan account. So they're going to want that all cleaned up.
Who's going to want to buy that?
Exactly. So,
yeah.
So these are all things people need to keep in mind, because it does affect valuations. And as both of us have said, something could happen unexpected that forces you to sell the business, and you need to start having these things in place beforehand, and not just wait for the end.
Absolutely. And look, businesses are a hard thing to sell at times as well too. So if a buyer comes up, you want to make sure all your ducks are in a row, because those opportunities don't always arise.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So before we move into the last topic, what are some of the common areas that people fall down in having their business set up to maximise the return on their business valuation?
I'd say what I said earlier, that they aren't paying themselves commercially.
Yep.
The other thing is, going back to what we were talking about earlier, that probably not knowing that there are people who actually go through and value businesses. It's not you don't just have to rely on this rule of thumb, this benchmark process where somebody goes, but our industry is just 3 times earnings. But if you work hard on your business and you have it running efficiently, you should be remunerated for that.
That's right.
Because those businesses are actually quite rare. Majority of the ones that I value don't have those things in place. So if you're doing that, you're already ahead of the game.
Yep.
I think that's probably those sorts of things. If you can improve on those, and just know that there are people out there, there are people like, one of the things I do for people is, we're going through a process at the moment where we're helping a lot of people improve the value of their business. We're saying, okay, if you're wanting to exit in 3 to 5 years, we'll value it today.
Yep.
We'll work out where you want to be. And my job is to go through, and because of the way I value, I can assess where the elements of risk are.
Yep.
And I can say, okay, well, you need to get it to this level to get to that price without changing your profit.
Yep.
Like, this is just doing assessing risk and minimizing risk. So these little things that you can do without having to go out and get more customers.
Yep.
You'll find that probably happens anyway, and you'll become more efficient, so the profit gets better anyway.
That's
but
right.
isn't that great? Because that's going up, and then your multiple's going up even higher. And better to change your multiple than necessarily have to just change your profit.
Exactly.
Yeah, so those elements we can do. I just come into the valuing bit, and it all gets handed back to the advisor. So the other thing I'd say is get a really good advisor.
Yeah, someone who knows that this is necessary. Yeah.
Yeah, and someone that's comfortable to bring in other professionals when they're needed, because we're all very good at what we specifically do.
That's right.
But it's knowing that we do that and when to bring us in and those sorts of things. Yeah,
for sure.
And it can be an expensive exercise to get started on, but you have to invest a little bit at the beginning to get something back at the end.
Well, it's like anything. Like what we do as lawyers, what you do is valuations. It's the investment that you're making in the future, and it's not a cost; it's an investment. So
it is an investment. You're right. Yeah, it is.
Changing language that people need to start thinking about as an investment rather than a cost, because a cost makes it sound like it's thrown away, and I always try and change it because this is an investment in your future. So.
Doing those things, going right back to the beginning when you're setting up a business, putting it in the right structure that's going to suit for you. There's 3 entities to my structure, and I've got one business in there, but it's just knowing how to put that all together to make sure that works, and it's going to work into the next future bit, because swapping those is a pain in the butt, to be perfectly honest.
Pain in the butt, and it can be costly. There's taxes.
There's stamp duty, there's taxes, could be CGT events. Yeah, that's right.
All manner of things. So that's people need to get that right advice early on. But let's move into the final topic, and that's the future. Disruption's a buzzword. You and I are part of a mastermind where people are always talking about disruption and all the rest of it. What do you see as the biggest challenges in your industry, say, in the next 5 years?
So we have technology is always one.
Yep.
I think, I know myself, I'm trying to find ways to be able to use technology smarter, but that takes time as well too. As we were talking about before we started, you get caught doing what you do every day, but you've got to put a bit of investment into that moving forward. Yep. A big part of my industry is people, because at the end of the day, it's the people that, it's my experience in that. We can do as much as we can with technology, but one thing I always do when I do evaluations, we sit back and we go, okay, but would I actually pay that for that business? Yeah, and so we pull it apart that way. Another part, because I work, majority of what I do is as a court expert. Probably just a pet peeve of mine, but the English language is dropping. As the younger ones come through, I sort of go, oh, where's the grammar, where's that? And that's really important, because what we do is we turn numbers into words and explain that to people. And all day, every day, I'm talking to people that are quite often intimidated by numbers and don't like them. At the moment that they hear them, they just sort of go, oh, no, I don't want to have to deal with that. Just tell me the answer. But you have to get them to understand, because then they can grow, they can make it better. The last thing, the big thing for us at the moment is the economy. Because we're valuing businesses today, that has such a big impact. What's going on? See, all those factors that I just said to you are risk factors in my own business. And it can be what the governments decide what they're going to do with the budget and all those sorts of things. That's going to affect my business. So those are my risk factors.
Yeah, and we're recording this in March 2019, and the economy is going one way now, and it could turn up, it could turn down. You just don't know in the next 5 years, do you?
That's right. Yeah, you don't know. Don't know at all.
Yeah. So all things to think about and things to consider. I love that, and what you said before about the English language is that I'm a bit of a nerd in the sense that I read The Economist every week. People, could judge me for that or not. But there was an interesting column in that in the last issue about the English language, and not to go too much into it, but about the fact that a lot of European countries, like the French, have a department which is all about the French language and keeping it, on message and in one way, but the English doesn't have that, and it's spread along so many different countries. So the evolution of the languages is quite an interesting topic, and that's a whole other discussion, I think.
Well, yeah, like I was saying earlier, it's a lot of what I do, and this works in the commercial world as well too, because when I have partnership splits, we bring them in and I do a live valuation.
Yep.
But it's the English language and the words that you use, and I've got some training in negotiation and that. So to pull elements out of people, to know what to ask, to know how to ask it is a skill.
It is.
And that you won't get from computers. That's a huge algorithm to build in a computer. So, and we all both know the English language, if it's said in one way, it can be interpreted that way, or it can be interpreted the other way. So, yeah, it's a very good skill to have, but it is, I think, I hope it's not dying.
I certainly wasn't suggesting it was dying. I was just saying that, because I agree with you. I think the words that we use are very important, and the words that we use to describe our own things is very important. I've had
the message we get across, it's so important.
Yeah,
for business, for buying it. Yeah,
I've had Chandel Lopezetta on this podcast before, and who and she always talks about the language that we use and the language that we tell ourselves, and it's really, really important that we're conscious of that going forward, and that is, and the way that we interpret it and the way that other people interpret it is based on their experience. So that's a whole other discussion about neuro-linguistic programming that we can leave for another day.
Yeah, it is, and I haven't done that myself, but I just know from the years of me sitting around a board table discussing mergers and acquisitions, you've got to be on your game to know what you're going to say to the other side, what information you're going to give out, and the way you're going to present that information.
Yep.
To get what you're wanting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Well, if it's okay, we'll move into our quick fire questions. So I'll ask you a question and just give me the first thought that comes into your mind. So the first one is, how did you make your first dollar?
In primary school.
Yep.
I started a friendship circle, and we were making these friendship bands. We were selling them for 20 cents. My teacher caught on, confiscated it. But she didn't confiscate it and say, that's it, you're not doing it. She turned the entire classroom into a bit of a little slave labour place. So we had to listen to her teach, but we had to make these. And the money that we made from that, we hired a bus and took our entire class and another class to the Eka.
Nice.
So I didn't make any profit out of that business.
Didn't make any profit, but you have to go to the Eka. So, which is, for our international listeners, there's an exhibition in Brisbane that happens like that.
That's right. That was a big thing when you're, 8 years old, 9 years old.
Yeah, when you're in that age bracket, it's great. When you get to our age, it's really not something you want to go to.
No, that's right.
So my children really wanted to go to it soon, so I'll have to get back into it. That's down the track. So the second question, what is a book that you think every business owner should read?
There's a couple that I read right at the beginning, which I go back and reread all the time. I read the 4-Hour Work Week, the Tim Ferriss one. I find it's so full of information, and whilst a lot of it I wouldn't necessarily implement, it makes me think about things differently.
Yep.
Another one that gets brought up in our mastermind group quite often is Profit First.
Yes.
And I think that's really important, because I think we need to realise, and that feeds into my my comments earlier about, trying to make things commercial, make your wage a commercial wage, try and get it to that stage, and then the profits that you're earning after that, it's going to look very attractive to any investor. And it just makes the whole process so simple. I find, this is going off topic a little bit, but when we are selling businesses, to pull all those things together, you've got a short time. Usually you've got a week, 2 weeks to pull everything together, get all your ducks in a row.
Yep.
And it's a lot of long hours to try and pull that together if you don't. And you're having to pay professionals to pump all that together. if you've already got all that organised, then it's not going to be as much work. It's not as stressful.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm partway through reading this book, but it's really quite good. It's Traction by Gino Wickman. That's a great one.
Yep.
And the other one I'd probably throw in is you need a release every so often. I don't get time to read the books, but I do a bit of travelling at the moment. So I'm in the car. The Harry Potter's read by Stephen Fry. Oh, he does all the voices. But you need to get out, because I'll be listening to that and then I'll be thinking about some other imagination thing and think, oh, I could do this in the business. Everything comes back to business. So you need time out.
I couldn't agree more. I've heard before that Stephen Fry's amazing in those books, so I'll have to get into those.
He's brilliant.
Yeah. And as far as the other ones go, Profit First. For many years, I was told to read that book, and I didn't. And as soon as I read it, I was oh wow, I should have read this. I wish I read this 6 years ago.
Yeah.
when I read it and we've implemented it, and I couldn't agree with you more. That's
I think the one for personal people, the sort of equivalent is the Barefoot Investor one.
That's right.
Just start putting things in place personally, and read the Profit First for the business, and it's just like we were talking about earlier. It's just setting it up from the beginning. And even if you're 10 years down the track, go in and start setting these things up. It takes a little bit of time. It's harder to move the wheels, but it'll set things up to make it easier.
Yeah.
Down the track.
And we've done it. We did it 7 years into our business, and we started Profit First. And so I think that's great. And there's a mastermind that I'm running, and we're just going into Profit First in April. So it's going to be an interesting change to see all the people in the mastermind that I've started doing that as well. So that's really cool.
That's fantastic.
Last question is, if you could give advice to your younger self, what would that advice be?
Don't be so hard on yourself.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and I think a lot of us that go out and start businesses, we hum and ha over things in our head, and people don't probably realise how long it takes to make a decision, because you're back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Do I not? Do I? And I think trust your gut a bit and just go with it. And if you make a mistake, it's not the worst thing in the world.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's great advice. I don't have anything else to add, so I agree 100%. All right. So finally, thank you so much for your time today. I think our viewers and listeners are going to get a lot of value out of today. But before I let you go, have we missed anything that you think is important that you want to get across?
I guess the only thing I'd really like to get across is the fact that valuation is quite simple. I say that, and then I say make sure you try and get an expert if you are going to get it valued, because there are a lot of complexities. But the simple elements of it, if I was to barrel it all down, your income, and by income I mean what you take home, so your profit that you're taking home at the end of the day, and your multiple. And your multiple is a combination of all the risk. So try and keep that risk as low as possible. Your multiple is going to go higher.
Right.
Easy way to get more money for your business at the end of the day.
Excellent. Excellent. And finally, if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Oh, I have the most original name in the world. The website is Jenny Letts, JennyLetts.com.au. You can find me through that. It's quite easy, and there's an email and phone number and everything on that.
Great. We'll put that in the show notes. But thank you so much for your time, and I'll speak to you soon.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Jeremy.
Welcome, Jenny.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Jenny Letts. There's plenty of great information that was in that interview that you can use today to help you to get that valuation of your business right. And as we talked about a number of times, you really need to be careful to make sure that you're maximizing the value of your business right now. If you're not doing that, then you're going to be behind the curve long term. I really hope that you enjoyed that interview. Please check out the show notes at businesslegallifecycle.com.au/185. You can download the workbook from there as well. We'll be back next Monday with the next edition of Business Legal Lifecycle TV and our podcast.